What's going on, everybody? This is episode 10 of Ears to the Canvas. I'm your host, Ryan Truland, and of course, there's a ton of news out on the UFC once again. It truly is the sport that never sleeps. It really is. But before we get into that, I just want to thank everybody who's been a listener so far. I hope that you keep supporting. I will have more guests on in a couple weeks, still figuring out the audio. But guest appearances will be coming. But right now you can find Ears to the Canvas on YouTube. That is the place to find Ears to the Canvas. Please subscribe and hit the alarm button. And like the video if you enjoy the episode. Don't want to waste any more time. So like I said, a lot of news came out over the weekend with the UFC. Of course, we had the UFC Fight Night with Jessica Ai and Cynthia Calvillo with the main event. Not a ton of news actually came out of that. It's just more news, just drama, headlines. Every day there's stuff coming out, matchups. So I want to start off with something that really piqued my interest. It was in the lead up to the Fight Night card on Saturday. Dana White was doing some interviews, press conferences, and somebody asked him, why is the UFC 252, which is in August, DC versus Stipe 3, why is the location right now to be determined? That's what the status of that location is. So Dana replied, and he said, because with everything that's going on, it's a day-by-day, week-by-week scenario right now, as it has been for the last few months. And things are changing rapidly still as we begin to open up. And he is hopeful that there is a possibility of having UFC 252 in a Vegas arena with fans. That's why it's to be determined currently. That's what he's hoping. Otherwise, it will be at the UFC Apex. It is scheduled to be in Vegas. UFC 252 in August. But he is hopeful that he can get that into an arena and pack it out with fans. We'll see if that's a possibility. Again, nobody knows how fast things are going to open up and what things will look like once they do open up. He was also asked, would he do it in an arena with social distancing regulations in place? And he said no. He will not have a half-full arena. He would rather just have the fights at the Apex with no fans until he can have a sold-out arena, like as if prior to COVID. He will not do a half-full arena, he said, which is interesting. I mean, things have gone very smooth at the Apex so far and in Jacksonville when they were down there. Something related to having fans in attendance, news came out, I think it was yesterday, if not Saturday. New Zealand rugby. Rugby is very popular over there in New Zealand and Australia. They had a rugby match with fans in attendance. So that's pretty big news. It's also very related to the UFC because we have in the UFC a middleweight champion right now who is quite possibly the biggest star in the UFC. He's definitely top 3. And his name is Israel Adesanya, the last style bender. Undefeated, star qualities to him. He's just a presence and a gift to the UFC. Incredible kickboxer, and he's just developing his all-around game. With each fight, he just gets better. So, right now, he along with John Jones in the light heavyweight division, because we don't know what's going on there. Every other division has their title fight either announced or at least put in place. You got flyweight with Figueiredo and Benavidez coming up. That's for the vacant flyweight belt. Then you got the vacant bantamweight belt going down. Peter Yan versus Jose Aldo. That's going to be next month, UFC 251. Then you got the featherweight belt also on that card. Volkanovski versus Holloway 2. Lightweight, you're going to have Khabib Gaethje probably going down in September. That might happen in Abu Dhabi. Welterweight, UFC 251 headliner next month. Usman versus Burns. Then, like I said, middleweight and light heavyweight is a little murky. Then heavyweight, we got in August. Just mentioned that. They're hoping to do that in an arena maybe. And that's DC versus Stipe 3. Nothing right now for Izzy. But a lot of fights are in place. Right now, it's backed up. He's a main event. He will not be a co-main event on any card to anybody. He is a main event. Right now, July is booked for the pay-per-view. August is booked. September is booked, pretty much, with Gaethje and Khabib. So you're looking at October for Adesanya, and he's going to fight Costa. That's essentially set in stone. He's the next challenger. And fight fans are very excited for that fight. I am as well. But you're looking at October. Now, the news with New Zealand having fans. New Zealand is... Adesanya reps New Zealand as the country that he fights out of. He lives there. They love him. You saw that when he fought Whitaker. He has a lot of support over there. And they had fans. Could he pack out an arena in October with fans? Him versus Costa. That would be... If it doesn't happen in August with DC, maybe it could happen in October with Adesanya versus Costa in an arena with fans. We'll see. Again, a lot of things could change. It's very early. Things are happening so quick with this virus, as we've seen. And I expect that to happen again as things begin and continue to open up. We're getting back to normalcy. And I can't wait to see if we have fans in either August or October possibly cheering on a UFC pay-per-view. Now, UFC Fight Night, Jessica Ai, Cynthia Calvillo happened this Saturday. Like I said, I don't know how many people actually watched it. Not a lot of big names on this card. But for anybody who did watch, the way that this card kicked off was very entertaining. Kicked off, we had 3 fights that were knockouts in under a minute to start this card. And it's funny because Dana White has constantly been saying how the smaller octagon does not produce more finishes than the regular sized octagon. That him and his team have done the research, crunched the numbers or whatever, and have come to the conclusion that it's pretty much the same in whatever size octagon they fight in as far as finishes go. And that may be true because after the 3 straight knockouts, there was a lot of decisions. And I do believe him on the finishes part, but could the smaller octagon lead to just more action in general? Yes, and I think it does. Slightly. Either way, there's going to be a lot of action in the UFC. There's 2 guys in a cage trying to knock each other out. Or 2 females. But I do think this slightly smaller cage does slightly produce more action. Quickly on the main event, Calvillo beat the number 1 contender, which is always, of course, impressive. It's the number 1 contender. But I still don't think she deserves a title shot right away against Valentina. The fight went to decision, which isn't incredibly surprising. Calvillo fought a very good fight, without a doubt. The first round was back and forth. Both girls were just getting their feet wet. And then Calvillo implemented a very good strategy. From there on out, she continued to take Jessica down and just control the fight from there. It was and got the decision victory. I think she should fight another opponent before she gets a chance at Valentina. But unfortunately, who would she fight? Maybe Chutagian. But yeah, Valentina's still searching for an opponent there at flyweight. There's another female though who's searching for an opponent, and the search might come to a screeching halt if she does decide to hang up the gloves for good. Amanda Nunes, the greatest of all time, the Lioness. We just saw her dominate in another title defense over Felicia Spencer. And she came out, it was reported that she said this weekend that she's considering hanging up the gloves. Kind of a Henry Cejudo approach in that she feels like what else really is there for her to prove. And I couldn't agree with her more. She's defended both belts. She beat the woman who people thought was the scariest female fighter of all time, Chris Cyborg. Knocked her out in the first round. She's beaten Shevchenko twice. She's beaten everybody. Ronda, Holm. Everybody that there is to beat, she's beaten. Jermaine Durandamy. Who else is there? What more can she gain, honestly? She does put herself in harm's way each and every time she steps into the cage as a fighter. What more does she have to prove? It's similar to Cejudo. Cejudo retired. He's still retired. There's still a number, obviously, that he will come back for. It's more of a money ploy with Cejudo, but he also is content with retiring on top. And I agree with Nunes. I support her decision if she does decide to hang it up on top. Because you look at the rankings, she's the bantamweight champ as well. Let's look at the bantamweight rankings. You got Jermaine Durandamy there at number 1. Jermaine is a good challenge for Amanda. You saw that when they fought recently. Amanda's fight before Spencer. Competitive fight. Jermaine's one of the best female strikers on the planet. Okay, but she already beat her. You got Holly Holm at 2. Nunes, for lack of a better term, fucked her up. Then you got Aspen Ladd, who a lot of people have pointed to. She's got a fight coming up. If she gets that win, she'll be the number 1 contender, I'm sure. So that's a name. Then you got Juliana Pena. You got Irene Aldana. She's fighting Holly Holm. If she beats Holly, then maybe her. But still, none of these women are big names, that big fight. You saw Nunes. She was the main event at UFC, the last UFC pay-per-view. And that was against Felicia Spencer. There's no way she's going to be a main event again on a pay-per-view. There's just no way when you look at the opponents. How do you sell any of these fights? There's just no way to sell any of these fights. The featherweight rankings are similar. There's no stars for her to fight. She's beaten them all. So if Amanda Nunes does decide to retire without fighting again, I support her. And she will still be the greatest of all time for a long time. There's nobody on the roster right now who has a chance of dethroning her at that. I mean, we'll see what Wei Li does if she's able to keep stringing together wins and defending belts. She would have to be a 2-division champ. She'd have to move, probably fight Valentina. Amanda's resume is just unparalleled with anybody else. She's beaten Valentina twice. Valentina's the second greatest female fighter in the world right now. She's incredible, but she is the queen of the flyweight division, and Nunes is just too big for her. Too powerful. So, we got 4 cards on Fight Island. Starting July 11th. Then you got, when's the second one? You got 4 cards in a 2-week span between July 11th and July 25th. It is happening. It's called Fight Island. The island is Yas Island. It's in Abu Dhabi, which is in the Middle East. It's going to be scorching hot there, which fighters have already talked about. It always is when you're fighting over there, which truly does add another element to the fight, each and every fight. So you got July 11th, July 15th, July 18th, and July 25th. All Fight Island in a 2-week span. Craziness. So we're going to get to know, we know just about everything as far as big fights go for the pay-per-view. UFC 251, that's the first fight on Fight Island, July 11th. A lot of the other fights are going to be announced later this week for the other cards. The UFC has a matchmaking meeting tomorrow, Tuesday. And I think a lot of news will probably come out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in regards to those cards on Fight Island. I'm very much looking forward to see if, say, Sean O'Malley gets put on one of those cards. There's just a lot of guys who I think want to fight on those cards, want to fight on Fight Island, and are very interested right now in getting those quick turnarounds. Dana mentioned that at a press conference this weekend, the quick turnarounds. And I think a lot of fighters are going to be doing that. Speaking of Sean O'Malley, I know he crowned himself the bantamweight champ, which is funny. He's called out Cody. I know he's very confident in himself and his abilities. He thinks he can beat anybody right now in the world in the bantamweight division. And although that may be true, he is very talented, of course. I think he can beat most of the bantamweights in the division. I don't think he will, and I don't think he should fight Cody Garbrandt in his next fight. Again, I don't think that fight will happen. I think the UFC usually does a very good job with acknowledging a star and growing that star at a proper pace. You've seen it with guys like Conor. Adesanya, they did a very good job building opponents, just progressing through the rankings, not making too big of a jump too quickly. And I think with O'Malley, Garbrandt might be too big of a jump too quickly. I think you're seeing some back and forth with O'Malley's camp and Marlon Chito Vera. I think that would be a good fight for him. I think he said it too. I think he and I agree with this, that another highlight knockout could be the result of that fight, which isn't a bad thing, obviously, for him. You saw how much news that knockout that he had last week got. And Vera is a name, I've said him before, Sonya Don, Rob Font. You got names in that bantamweight division down there who can be really good opponents for him before Cody. If he gets another win like that, he's ranked 15 right now after that last win over Eddie Wineland. He'll obviously move up. He'll probably crack the top 10 with another impressive win. And then you start getting into those top 5 guys. Cody's ranked number 5 now. He's a former champ. One more fight for O'Malley than the top 5 guys. That's my stance on that. And I'm pretty firm on that, honestly. Uh, Last thing, we had Cara Roberson missed weight by 4.5 pounds. Jessica I missed weight by 1/4 of a pound. And Dana White is having he's not hearing any excuses. And I agree with him, because some people make the excuse for fighters. Some fighters, I don't know if they'll make this excuse themselves, but about these short notice fights and having trouble getting down and making weight. And then Dana replies to that, and I couldn't agree with him more, that you look at the cards that have already happened, and there hasn't been a big missing weight issue. It's been pretty regular with that. So a guy like Roberson, there is no excuse on missing weight by 4.5 pounds. That's a lot. That's a lot. He got submitted in the first round off of that. That's not a good look. If you're in a main event spot, missing weight, even if it's 1/4 of a pound, isn't a good look for Jessica I. Both those fighters lost too. So Dana White has no sympathy for. He expects, if you want to fight, that you're training and waiting on the call. He's made it clear that these fights are happening on short notice. Everything's very, very, everything's on the nose. It just happens right now in the way the world is right now. Things are taken day by day, week by week, and he expects fighters to be training right now and ready for the call. And I agree with him. Dana, I know I've been really riding Dana, like in a positive way. I just think he's making a lot of good decisions right now. Of course, you got the stuff with the fighter pay. I do think that fighters deserve more. Although I understand how right now, with them losing a lot of their profit due to no fans, I do understand not budging on that specific topic and issue right now. But I do, once things do get back to normal and fans do begin to are able to go watch fights and things are back to normal, I expect and I will be clamoring for Dana White and the UFC to begin to pay their fighters, not just their stars like John Jones and Masvidal, the guys Cejudo who want money. They deserve more money, and the guys on the prelims deserve more money. The guys fighting on the main card deserve more money. Everybody does. I know there's sponsoring issues, but the fighters deserve more money, and that's just plain and simple. So hopefully, I don't think anything will be resolved in 2020 in regards to that. Hopefully 2021, fans will be in arenas, and then the yells and the cries for fighter pay will be heard, I hope. That's pretty much it for episode 10. Gonna have another episode coming out probably Thursday or Friday. Got a UFC card this Saturday again. Better than this past Saturday on paper. You got Curtis Blades and Alexander Volkov at heavyweight. That's an interesting striker versus wrestler matchup. Volkov is 6'7", which is always crazy to just watch him in there. Very good at engaging space. But Blades is a tank. He's a hell of a wrestler. He can also strike too. So that's going to be a good matchup, I think. That'll be an entertaining fight for however long it lasts. So episode 10 is wrapped up. Please go on YouTube and support. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Just search Ryan Truland. And as for me, Ear to the Canvas, episode 10, we're out. Alright, let me just take a quick break to tell you guys about our sponsor, Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's an app available to download on your computer, iPhone, or Android, and it's the easiest way to make a podcast. For starters, it's free. Everything's free on Anchor, and it gives you all kinds of tools that allow you to record and edit and create your very own podcast right from your computer or phone. Now you may be thinking to yourself, man, how do I get my podcast out to the people? Well, Anchor even distributes your podcast on all the biggest platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can even profit from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor is everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Go download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.